Hey, what is going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and I'm going to be showing you all in this video if you have a RGH or JTAG modified Xbox 360, really a hard modded system such as this, which is able to run homebrew and all that fun stuff. I'm going to be showing you all for fat and slim owners how you can physically replace and upgrade the hard drive on your console. Now, a few things to note. First of all, this guide is intended for people who are running a hard modded system with a modified NAND. That means, again, you're able to run homebrew and really some fun stuff like this on your console. If you have a retail NAND, so if this is for the retail side of a dual NAND system, a flashed console, or a completely stock console, this video is not going to work for you due to security sectors required for a retail NAND. I do have another video showing how to do this for a retail system using a Western Digital drive, and all the details are included in that video. But for this video, there's going to be less limitations, thankfully, as long as you have a hard modded system. Now, if you have a hard modded system, a good thing to note is that the limitation here for size is going to be 2 terabytes. So if you're using a hard drive or a SSD, that's going to be your limit. Lastly, I'll go ahead and show the physical install as well as the format setup on here, but if you have any data on this, it's not going to cover a data transfer. So if you are using a RGH system that you might have just set up, it would be good to do this here at the beginning when you're kind of getting your feet wet and getting started. So you start off with a nice larger hard drive as opposed to maybe one of the stock 20 or 60 gig drives that comes with the system. So let's go ahead and get into this. Now, there's going to be 2 processes I will cover. One of them is going to be for the fat drives, which will require some tools, and the other one is going to be for the slim drives, which I will warn you is going to be destructive. However, if you want to use the casing, that's going to be up to you. Now, for the fat drives, this will of course require your 2.5 inch or laptop sized hard drive or solid state drive you're going to be installing. Of course, you will need to remove the hard drive casing from your console itself. And to get in here, we're just going to need 2 things. We're going to need a T6 security bit and a T10 security bit. Now, when you flip it upside down like this, there's going to be 4 screws that you'll need to remove, and these are going to be the T6 screws. Go ahead and remove them. As you can see, there's 3 of them that are going to be readily accessible, but there's going to be a 4th one which is going to be covered up by a Microsoft sticker. And if you want to, you can either pierce through that sticker or you can just remove it. But the screws are all going to be there. Now, once you remove the screws, you're going to want to flip the drive right side up. And this is kind of how I open it. I open it gently from the back and I lift it up, and then I'm going to pull it forward. And you're going to see here, I do this because there's a little bit of a mechanism here up at the front with the button right there. You're just going to want to make sure, really, even if this comes apart, it's fine and it's easy enough to put back together, but you don't want to lose that spring. It's just annoying to kind of put back on there, and you really don't want to misplace it. But either way, once you have everything shown like so, you're then going to want to get your T10 bit, and there's going to be 4 black screws that are holding on this piece on top of the hard drive that's already in there. So go ahead, take that T10 bit and just unscrew these 4 black screws. Once these have all been unscrewed, you're going to want to take off this top metal piece, and your hard drive is almost accessible. From here, you're going to want to pull it back a little bit, and you can then disconnect this piece like so. But you're going to also have to move the hard drive up a tiny bit, like pull it towards you and up. Don't use too much force, but once you do that, you should be able to slide the hard drive out. And just keep in mind that when you put in your new drive, you are going to have to put it in upside down like this. But there is our original 60 gigabyte drive. At this point, we can put our old drive to the side and grab your new SSD or hard drive. Just plop it back in like so, make sure it goes in upside down, and connect it back to the SATA connector. It might be a little bit of a tight squeeze, but you can get it reconnected, and once we're all good at that point, we just work backwards. You want to take the metal piece that we removed, plop it back on top, make sure it is fitting there properly, and then we're going to take the 4 black T10 screws and screw them back in place. I also wanted to show you all, if this mechanism comes apart, no big deal, just make sure the spring is in there and kind of notched in properly, then take the black piece and notch it in as such. It's all keyed so you'll see where it's supposed to go, and then put the button back in place. Now we just need to put the top cover back onto our casing. Now the way that we removed this, what I do is I just quite literally work backwards. I come from the top, go in at a bit of an angle, like so, and kind of go to the front, make sure everything is connected properly there, and then I push it down to the back. And at this point, it should be secured well enough. Seems to be all fine. So you now want to take your 4 T6 screws and screw them back in. Now just be careful right here, you can over tighten these incredibly easily. So what I recommend is when you're screwing them back in place, once you feel it stop, you want to stop. You don't want to over tighten this at all, and it's incredibly easy to over tighten these. But once you have everything screwed back in, congratulations, if you are using a Phat console, you're all done at this point. So you can now take your hard drive casing with the new hard drive or SSD installed and plop it back onto your console. However, if you have a slim system, let's go ahead and check that out. Now for the slim, I do have a few disclaimers. First of all, if you do insist on using one of these casings, I would actually not recommend opening up your casing. The reason why I'm saying this is because it is going to be a destructive method. This case is not designed to be open and closed. It's designed to be closed, and that's it, end of story. So when we open it up, you will never be able to close this case properly again, and you will see by the end of this here, unfortunately. So that's just how it is when you open these cases up. If you do insist on using a case, and if you can spare a few dollars, I would actually recommend just purchasing a new case online, or even just a used one, just a third-party one that you can plop your new drive into and install easily enough. However, if you do insist on using the casing itself and you want to reuse your old drive's casing, you can still follow along with this. Now you can also just plug the old drive into your system without the casing, but I don't recommend that either, and if you're watching this part, you probably don't want to do that either. Now what I did here while I've been talking is I took a hairdryer and I kind of just heated all around the hard drive itself for about a minute. Now, I will say this is kind of part of the process I used, but I don't feel like it helped me out all too much, so you might want to bypass this here. But if you feel like it might help out a little bit with loosening up the glue here, you can try it out. Either way, I ran it for about a minute. The hard drive was nice and at least somewhat hot, and then this is what I did. Now this is going to take several minutes and you do want to be careful. What I'm using here is just my hands and an X-Acto knife. What you'll need to do here is find the seam for the drive cover or the casing cover itself. And at least when I was starting, I kind of just kept taking my X-Acto knife and I was just kind of slotting it into all of the corners here just to get a little bit of traction going and just something going on there. Now I did make some small attempts or small starts on each corner just to kind of help me out a little bit later, but then what I did here was focus more on one corner. And this is kind of what I did. As you can see, I was just kind of gently but firmly rocking this into that corner and kind of scraping or scoring a little bit on that seam there. You can even dig a little bit like I was showing, but again, there's not going to be a super clean way of doing this. If you're cutting this casing open or just getting in here, you are going to quite literally have to break it open. Once you have one corner a good amount of the way, or you have at least a good start there, you can then go on to another corner like I'm showing right here and kind of just do the same thing. Just kind of gently cut into the plastic itself along that seam, and you should hopefully start being able to, again, quite literally break it open. I am not a fan of this process here, but hey, if you want to reuse this casing, you can try this out yourself. Now, after a bit, I did have some more luck on this corner here, and as you can see, I was actually able to dig the tip of my X-Acto knife's blade into that directly. So I was able to make sure that this was still above the hard drive, so the hard drive itself was not being touched. However, I was able to at least make contact and get into the case itself. Now, once I felt like I was able to kind of get a good grasp in there, I end up taking another, at this point you can take maybe like a spudger tool or any other type of pry tool if you have one available, and just use something with a little more force here to actually get into the drive itself. Now this will look a little bit scary, but check this out. I was actually able to get into the casing itself, and from here you're not going to want to be pushing towards where the drive is, but you're kind of want to rock it a little back and forth and see if you can unlock that seam or open it in a way. As you can see, I was able to actually start getting the casing opened, so from here I was able to work at it a little bit further. Now this is essentially what I was able to do, and that's why I started on these corners here, because I was then able to slide it over to where the drive is, and I was able to open this side up much easier. So once I was able to get this here, as you can see, that is now the original corner that I was working on, and I was able to get that opened as well too. So it's going to just be a little bit of a slow process. You don't want to be super destructive here, but do keep in mind you are going to have to be a little bit destructive in order to get this open. Unfortunately, that's just going to be a part of this. Now, even though I already had a part of this open, so you can see it's maybe about a fourth or a third of the way opened, I then went in with my X-Acto knife, and I was just trying to kind of weaken this seam here yet again. I was able to get cut in there successfully, and I was able to not injure myself in the process here, thank goodness. But as you can see, you can kind of just do a little bit of a mix there with the X-Acto knife and kind of just prying this open if you have a pry tool available on hand. Now once I felt like I had a good amount of the way open, at this point I kind of just used a little bit more force here. You can see where it's still just kind of closed up there, but I was able to really take my hands, literally rip it open like this while still trying to be at least somewhat careful. But as you can see, that is how this is. And if you look at the design of this, unfortunately this thing is, as I said at the beginning here, not designed to be closed and opened. It's just supposed to be closed and never ever opened again. But we were able to get the original 250GB drive out of here. Now you'll see the original drive went in the casing a little something like that, and in order to replace it with an upgraded one, you're just going to want to take your new SSD or hard drive, make sure it is fitting in the exact same way and orientation, and put it into the casing like this. Now for the top part of the casing here, the cover itself, unfortunately you can't really reuse this here. It is going to just get a little damaged in that process, and again, I repeat this multiple times, but this casing is unfortunately just not designed to be open and closed like that. So you can use the bottom half of the hard drive casing to keep everything in place and stable, but you won't really be able to properly use the top cover. You can even see that when I'm putting it all back in the console itself, I'm attempting it here, and it's just that top cover doesn't go on there 100% correct. So if you want to try and fit it back on there, you're more than welcome to, but honestly, even if you do not use that top cover, that is totally fine. Just make sure it is all connected properly back into the console itself, and you can at least use the bottom half of that casing to keep the drive from moving around as much as it normally would. But that is how you plop it back into the Slim. Now once you have your drive physically reinstalled, we can now turn on the console itself and get it set up. From here, once you have your hard drive connected to your console and you turn your console on, it's pretty simple. Just go over to Settings, System, Storage, and it will show up as unformatted. So press Y to format this, format, say yes, and you'll probably have to enter your console serial number, so just be sure you do that. Typically, you'll be able to find it within the USB flap, or of course, if you're able to here, you can even go back over to Settings, Console Settings, and it's going to be within System Information. You can find it right here, so just enter in that number. Either way, we can go back to Storage, Unformatted, we're gonna format this, yes, and enter in our serial number. And once you enter it, it's going to be formatting. Give it a few seconds here, and there we go, your hard drive or solid state drive should show up. Now I know this is different than what I physically showed, but this is the hard drive I decided to install in here. So I put in a 500 gigabyte drive. After formatting, it's 460 gigs, so that's about it. At this point, you can just go through the process of, if you're starting fresh, just kind of going through a starter setup again, getting your games over apps and all that fun stuff. But that's really all there is to it. Thankfully, it's not too difficult, unless you have a Slim and you're trying to open up that casing. But either way, that's about all there is for this tutorial. This is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, a like would absolutely be appreciated, and if you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too.